everyone and welcome back to another day of Bookmas / vlogmas. We're doing our November reading wrap up because for us to be able to pick up new books in the month of December and read them together in upcoming vlogs, we kind of need to talk about the books that we read last month in November first, so then we can move on. So I picked up technically 25 according to Goodreads and Storygraph, but I think it's actually 24. We'll get to that. You'll see. 24 books in the month of November, which makes this the second highest reading month that we've had, which is crazy. And I know that the only reason that I read this amount of books this month compared to the rest of the year is because I said no to every single social event in November. I did not leave my house. I didn't go to any events. So being able to stay at home, we've been able to get through a good chunk of my physical TBR, as you can see. Out of those 24, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 are physical books. So more than half of the books that I read were physical books. Yay for the TBR. We got through a couple series, we got up to date with series. Honestly, we've really been doing quite well. I mean, I have been prioritizing series that I'm in the middle of and completing my physical TBR, and we've kind of been able to do the two of those hand in hand. So that's great. So I'm going to just start talking because we've got a lot of books to go through and I don't want this to be a huge vlog. I'm going to try and keep it as concise as I can and tell you my thoughts and opinions on these books, my ratings, and if I would recommend them or not. So we're going to start off with one of the first books that I picked up this month, which was Frost, but I also read Ambrosia, which is book 2, and the two of these together make the Frost and Nectar duet or series, the Frost and Nectar series. I still 100% don't really know the difference between a duology and a duet, but apparently they're different. But there is only 2 books in this series. There's book 1 Frost, book 2 Ambrosia, and I read book 2 on Kindle Unlimited because I was sent a physical copy from the publisher because I love C.N. Crawford. I've read the Fae Spy Academy trilogy and I love the way that C.N. Crawford writes humor. I think their books are really good if you read a lot of romance or fantasy and you're looking for your next God tier series. This probably isn't going to be that, but if you want more of like a bingeable romancy rather than fantasy romance, do you know what I mean? If you read a lot of contemporary romance books and you want to dip your toe into the world of fae or fantasy stories, I find their stories blend a mix of high fantasy elements with fae in more of a normal world, so technically a bit more of an urban fantasy, but it doesn't really read like typical urban fantasies if you compare them to City of Gods and Monsters, Crescent City, etc. I mean, why do so many people hate the word palate cleanser for in between books, but if you want a low commitment series with books that you're gonna giggle, you're gonna really find entertaining and enjoy, they're a little bit silly. Again, I'm obsessed with C.N. Crawford's sense of humor and the way that they include that banter in their stories, then I would definitely recommend them. And again, they're short, they're fun. And I've had some messages from some readers who have gone and picked up these books who typically read more contemporary books and have found that they really enjoy the way that it kind of blends the two, so that if you're used to reading more modern contemporary books and then you pick up one of these books and you start to get little snippets of fae, but it's not completely high fantasy, it's quite fun and has converted people to pick up more fantasy romance books. So I really enjoyed it. I think it's a 3-star duology. I think I prefer the Avalon Tower Fae Spy Academy trilogy over this, but again, this is so short. This book itself is under 300 pages, so it's really fast paced. I think I love to pick up books like these in my 24-hour readathons. I love to read them in between bigger book series. I like to read these types of stories once I've finished a big series or I don't know what I want to read next, or I feel like I'm going to be slumping after reading a God tier book, because I just need something that's fast-paced, fun, something that I'm giggling at while I'm reading. It's entertaining, it's capturing my attention. There you go, I finished book 1. Wow, I'm gonna go straight into book 2 and finish that too. Wow, I've just read a whole duology, an entire sitting over the weekend. So fun. The next 2 books I read were part of a series, an interconnected series. I read Collide and Revolve. These are book 1 and book 3 in an interconnected sports hockey romance series. I have already read book 2. That's why I've read book 1 and 3. Kind of skipped book 2 because I read book 2 first, not really realizing that I should have gone and read a book 1 first, because book 2 was sent to me as an ARC by the publisher. So I just read book 2 because I saw the word interconnected and thought that will absolutely be fine. And I really enjoyed book 2. I think the books in this series get better as they go along, and I do think that they are all written quite differently. It's not like reading an L. Kennedy series where you pick up one and they're in college, because book 1 starts off with these characters being in college and then you're reading quite young characters with typical or cliche tropes and, you know, hockey dynamics and situations where if you read a lot of college sports, ice hockey romance, it does get a bit overdone. Whereas book 2, we're following more of like a pro athlete and a ballerina, and I really liked those two characters. I think they might be my favorite characters in the series, like the two of them together. But book 3 was my favorite so far, and this one was set in college or university, but the situation was different. In this, we have a hockey player who ends up being paired up with this figure skater who needs a partner to skate, so he starts figure skating with her. So I'm like, I've not read a book that does that, and I've read so many sports college hockey romances, so I like that each story we get something different. So this one does start out quite reminiscent of other college sports hockey romances, and it was my lowest rated in the series so far, but that was a 3-star read. I think book 2 I rated a 3.75 star, and this I rated 4 stars. So I'm very excited for book 4. I think that could be my favorite. I mean, just looking at the ratings in the series as the books have gone along, I do think they get better, but the characters and the snippets we've had for what their kind of storyline is going to be and who it's going to be following, because it has now been confirmed, I'm very excited for book 4. So that being said, if you enjoyed book 1, continue on with the series, because I do think it gets better. But also, if you read book 1 and you weren't a big fan of it, I do think the other books are also better, so continue it. You could go and pick it up and maybe see if that does it for you. The next books I read were a trilogy. They're Unearthly by Cynthia Hand. These are paranormal YA fantasy books written around 2010, so nothing new. They have been brought out in these beautiful special edition covers by Fairy Loot, and I pre-ordered them earlier this year when I saw they announced them on their Instagram solely because of the covers. I did judge these books by its covers, but can you blame me, honestly? These books I have seen since in the UK have been put out for pre-order for a traditional republishing with new covers, because obviously a book series published in the mid to late 2000s has quite dated covers. You know the style of the paranormal YA books at that time. It was very, very of its time. These, I'm gonna put on the screen the new covers. They're also equally gorgeous. So if you weren't able to grab a Fairy Loot edition before they sold out, check out the UK covers. I'm not sure if they're being republished as well in North America under the same covers, but these are gorgeous. So beautiful. So similar style, you know, that like whimsical pastel fairy tale. Like, I think it's quite beautiful. But in book 1, we're following our main female character who is an angel, and angels are given a purpose in life, but their purpose comes to them kind of in like a dream or a vision, and it's not 100% clear. So their job is to figure out what their purpose is and then to fulfill it, to make sure that it happens. So she starts getting visions at 14 of her purpose, and once she's able to figure out bits and pieces of what it means, her and her family end up relocating to a new school. So at 16, she starts a new high school because she's been dreaming about this boy who's going to be in her class, and her purpose is connected to him, so she needs to figure that out. So we're in a high school setting with teenagers, 16-year-old YA. There is a love triangle. We all know how I feel about a love triangle. I love a love triangle. I eat it up. I also think a love triangle around 2010, they were just done so well, you know. So the books were so easy to read again because they were YA. The yearning in this was incredible. The mystery of figuring out the purpose I found really fun and kept me on my toes. Book 1 was definitely my favorite in the series, and that was a 5-star read. Book 2 and 3 were 4 stars. And then I also read the bonus novella 2.5 called Radiant. You can read it before going into book 3, but it was published in the Fairy Loot edition at the back of book 3. So I actually read it after I had read all 3 books. I wish that I had known that it was in the back of the book and I could have read that before I read book 3 after book 2, because it does give you some context, but you can look it up online. Goodreads and everything marks it as a separate book because technically it's a novella, it's a bonus content. So because I read it in book 3, I'm counting it as just being a part of book 3, though it's only in the Fairy Loot editions. But that being said, I think if you like books published around this time period, and you know what I mean if you read books in this time period, they have a very specific vibe, but I think it was really fun. I do think books published 15, 16 years ago are a little bit dated, and there's probably things in them that feel very of its time, but the overall just general idea of the plot, the love triangle, I felt connected to the characters, I cared what was happening. I still think about this story. I do recommend it. I know it's definitely not for everyone. I think a lot of people read these as well when they were teenagers or younger, and it's been really fun for me to go back and read these books that I didn't read growing up and then be able to talk to people straight away about them because everyone else has read them. Speaking of other books that I can talk to people about reading, I read Hollow Heathens book 1 and 2. I read book 1 because it was Laura's book club book of the month and I was going to her in-person book club, so I read that. It's also Bailey's favourite like book series, book boyfriend, specifically book number 2. So I read book 1, and I've publicly stated so many times that when I start series, I want to see them through, get up to date and complete them, rather than putting them down and then forgetting that they exist. So I read book 1, and then I followed it up by reading book 2. I enjoyed book 1, I gave it 4 stars. I enjoyed book 2 a little bit less, which was surprising because I thought that I would enjoy it more, but I gave that 3.5 stars. I think if you like dark, gothic, fantasy, romance, you will really enjoy these, but the fantasy element is less fantasy and more just witchy. Book 1, to me, felt like it followed more of a typical dark romance formula, where it kind of felt like a book in the Devil's Night series or the Legacy of God series, but had a dark gothic twist to it. Very atmospheric seaside town. Imagine lots of mist and fog and witch magic and sea, like the setting of Fairytale. And that's what book 1 felt like to me, but it felt quite, I was like, oh yeah, like I'm enjoying this, but it's kind of giving me similar feelings to books I've already read. Like while I'm reading it, I'm thinking of other books. Book 2 read, for me personally, completely different. It was reading more like Fairytale, Anathema, Carrie Lake style of dark gothic, less contemporary dark. It's part of a series and they are not really interconnected. You have to read book 1 to understand book 2, because there is an overarching plot line with characters in this world in book 1 that follows on from book 2. I would say you can't really skip and jump into book 2, but I would be so interested to hear what other people think about this, because I think I had a bit of a different reading experience compared to my friends like Laura and Bailey who have read this, and I want to know if anyone has had the opposite thoughts or feelings to me on this, or has felt the same thing. But I think we're getting a book in this series for every one of the Hollow Heathens, which is, will that be 4 or 5 books that we'll get? But the books are being published like a few years apart, so there's only 2 books out so far. It's an incomplete series. Bailey said that in her Facebook group, her husband posted about the fact that she's writing and books will be coming, so I think it's just been delayed. I think it may be a series that I will continue on with, because I'm very intrigued, especially about who I think the next characters could be. I really want to read their story, and because I'm getting a different kind of experience in between each read, and we are kind of seeing gaps of years in between each read, I think the possibilities are endless, the potential of where this series can go and how I could feel about it. So I think so far, rounded up, a 3.75 series, but also gothic dark romance books for me can be quite hit or miss. I love witchy elements and I do love a gothic, but I think I love gothic more in the vein of Rachel Gillig than I do Carrie Lake. Does that make sense? Like a lot of Edgar Allan Poe, poetic, overly gothic books I do love, but I do enjoy, but I have to be in the mood for them. Whereas I could read a Rachel Gillig gothic style fantasy any day of the week. I did read the Scared Sexy collection. So we had Hot for Slayer by Ali Hazelwood, Falling by Christina Lauren, Spicy Little Curses by J.T. Geisinger, I don't know how you pronounce their name, I'm very sorry. Space Vampire by Ruby Dixon, Beautiful Nightmare by Katie Robert, My Boyfriends Are All Monsters. Guys, I have to say, Ali Hazelwood was the best one in this, and I rated it 3.5 stars, because again, some of these were like 60 to 90 pages, very short novellas, but some of them were really, really bad. I mean, just my opinion. I just think I was kind of out on my depths with, I love paranormal romance, so I really liked Ali Hazelwood's, but the more it continued to get into, let's say, My Boyfriends Are All Monsters, I was like, oh, I'm not the target demographic for this book. This is not for me. Entertaining, but that was probably one of my least favorite things that I've read all year. Beautiful Nightmare though, it kind of read like Monsters Inc, but adults and make it spicy. It was so different. Like sometimes I just love reading books and I think, how did you come up with this in your head? Like genuinely, how did you think of this? Because my brain would have never gone there, and it was great entertainment. It was Halloween themed collection of novellas. I do like to read a collection of novellas, but anytime I read them and I go, one of these is good and the rest I did not enjoy, but I still read them. Overall, I think you want to read that, you go ahead, but you have been warned. Your Knife, My Heart by K.M. Morinova. I realized after I read this from the comments that you guys left me on my reading vlog where I did read this, that her other book that's really popular that I've seen is Leave Me Behind, is written in this world and was written before this one. This is a dark military romance, but we're in a different division to the other book, but you get more of the understanding of the military forces and the world and setup for that from reading her other book. So I do think I will go back and read it, but to me this is again very short. How many pages? Under 300 pages. Very short, going to be duology. I think it's a little bit predictable. I think it's very typical dark romance. He's very brooding and hates everyone, and his whole thing is that he kills every partner he's teamed up with, and he's been given her, and his only mission is to not kill her. Sometimes I'm just in the mood for this, and I think for this specific genre and type of dark romance, it's very much giving like early day Renaverse, but written better. But still like that little bit cheesy, guilty pleasure, you're giggling, you're like, oh my god, of course he's gonna say that, and of course she's gonna do that, and I can't believe what I'm reading right now, but I can't put it down. So again, I will be reading the second book. I think it's a fun time. Definitely not gonna be for everyone, but if you just love fun, silly little dark romance books, give it a shot. It was my first book of hers. I definitely want to go back and see and read the one that everyone raves about and talks about. I know that this type of dark romances can be hit or miss for anyone. It was a hit for me, but 3 stars. I read the 4th and final book in the Compelling Fate saga. It comes out this month. I think if you've been waiting for this book, you will be satisfied with this ending. I personally was, and I'm a big hater of endings of series. I find so many people love the final book in a series, and I just never love it. It's never my favorite, mainly because I'm sad I'm leaving the characters in the world and I'm not going to see them again, and because there's all this hype and anticipation leading up to it that when I get to it I'm like, oh no. But for me, the books in the series are all short. They're all around 450 pages each, which is, for a fantasy romance series, on the shorter end compared to larger books like Zodiac Academy that can go up to 1,000 pages long, and, you know, Quicksilver and Brimstone, which is 600-700 pages. The Legacy series from Blood and Ash, 700-800-900 pages, some of them. So it is on the shorter side, and I feel like the storyline has been quite concise. It's been really fun to read, and for the amount of pages that we've had and the amount of books and how quickly the storyline goes with the new characters being added in this world where half fae and humans exist, I was surprised by how much I cared about the characters, how much I connected to them, and how involved I got into the story. I loved the multi-POV chapters that came in books 3 and 4, and the way that everything is kind of connected. I definitely feel like I'm not ready to leave this world yet, which is great because the author has confirmed she's been picked up for trad publishing in North America or the USA. She's also been picked up with a new series, and the new series is set in the same universe. So kind of similar to how JLA and Melissa K. Rurik and some of my favorite fantasy authors will write multiple book series in the same world, so we'll still get snippets of these world, maybe even these characters, I don't know, but the way that, it's a long-winded way of basically saying that the way that the series ended has set up for a potentially even better, incredible new series that I'm excited to read. So I was very satisfied. I was not sad at the end, because the breadcrumbs that we were given for what the author's going to publish next have me so excited. So I think if you've been waiting for it, you'll love it. I think in the series so far, out of all 4 books, book 2 was definitely my favorite. I just think book 2 was so hard to top because if you've read it, you know. I read The Shadows Between Us by Trisha Levenseller. I wanted to read this because I read book 2, again, another interconnected series. In book 1, we're following one sister, and in book 2, we follow the other sister, and they both have their own romance storylines with 2 separate men, but set in the same world, and the stories slightly overlap. So I read book 2 first, and then went back and read book 1. I definitely think you can read it in any order, but kind of know, obviously, some minor spoilers of like who ends up together and character crossovers with them, so if you do want to read it in order, read it in order. But these are great interconnected romancy reads because the books are quite short, quite fast paced, but I just really love the way that Trisha Levenseller writes her sense of humor, and her female characters are very strong and not afraid to be unlikable. They're not meek and quiet, and they want to kind of change society for the better. The women in this world believe that they are equal to men and kind of push the boundaries and limits with that, and I think it's really fun to read it in her style of writing because again it is quite comedic and lighthearted. I really enjoy the way she writes banter, but for a 350 page standalone romantasy that we get the start of the story, the entire story, and then the book wraps up and that's it. I think that's probably harder to write than a whole series, so I did really enjoy it. And overall, I liked both books equally. A lot of people told me they didn't like book 2 and I would love book 1 more, but I actually found that I liked both of them the same. So it was 3.5 stars. If you're looking for an interconnected romantasy to read, I would recommend this. Brimstone by Callie Hart. This took me like 5 days to read because there was just so much happening and I couldn't really like binge the whole thing. I think if I was able to binge it like I did with Quicksilver, I probably would have maybe enjoyed it more. But I've seen a lot of people talk about the fact that they were editing grammatical errors that should have been picked up before printing, and some of the things didn't make sense in the way that in one chapter we would be following 2 characters who are in one part of the world, and the next chapter characters would be referred to as if they were there but actually they were somewhere else. Like it was just like minor inconsistencies. For me, that didn't take away from the story because I kind of read it and went, that's obviously an error. Let's continue reading. But I know that that's a big thing for a lot of people. I just think human error happens. It is what it is, you know? I'm sure they will correct that for future prints, and it didn't distract or negate from the storyline for me. What I am going to say though is I didn't read Kingfisher's point of view bonus chapters before going into this because I didn't know that you were supposed to, so I didn't read it. And I think all the plot points and things that were mentioned in the bonus chapter, because Laura sent me a summary after I had already finished this book, they're all referred to and mentioned in this book. We just have a bit more of the understanding and background context of, you know, how they came to be in the bonus chapters. So as someone who didn't read the bonus chapters before going into this, I thought it still made sense. But if you want the full context and understanding, it's recommended to read the bonus chapters before going into this. Anyways, I gave it a 4-star. I preferred Quicksilver to Brimstone. I really liked Carrion. I think he carried a lot of this book, and I really liked Sayers as well. I honestly just found myself not really caring too much for Kingfisher's point of view, which is shocking because I love a dual point of view. I just think when we see love interests in a fantasy series kind of get together, I kind of just stop caring at some point. Like, I don't need to read both of your point of views to understand how much you like each other. I like a little bit of mystery, you know? So I found the side characters and the subplots that were happening the most interesting part of the book, but the ending makes me think that book 3 could be my favourite. Morningstar by Pierce Brown, the third book in the original Red Rising trilogy. This wraps up the first arc in this series because I didn't realize until I started reading that there's the original Red Rising trilogy that was written, and then there's 3 more books published so far. I think a 4th is maybe coming next year. So the series is still being written, but we have a time jump and we start following more characters. Like the original trilogy, things happen in this world. The main character we're following, we kind of see a resolution, and then the second arc in the series, it kind of expands from there. Time jump, we're looking at other characters, different things. I've obviously not read the next book yet, so I can't confirm or deny if that is actually correct, but that is what I've been told. I did not know that. I thought it was like a 6-7 book series going in just from the first book point of view and plot line. But book 1, I have to say, when I read Red Rising, I did enjoy it and I gave it a 4-star because I think it was an interesting story. I just thought it maybe wasn't for me and I didn't really understand the hype until I read book 2. And when I read Golden Sun, I went, wow, okay, I understand it now. This is significantly better than book 1. 4.75 stars. I picked up Morningstar. I read that, 5 stars. Probably one of the best books that I have ever read. These stories feel so well thought out, but some of these characters are so likable, and also the character growth and development we get from the characters. Like, so much is happening, but I think for a very plot heavy book with a lot of detailed world building, it is such a character driven story. Reading this book, sci-fi, very out of my comfort zone, and I'm glad that I decided to push through with the original trilogy because now I've found a new favorite series. I read All Her Fault by Andrea Mara. I have been trying to get into thrillers. You guys have been asking me for a thriller reading vlog for a while. I promise I'm going to be working on one. I will do it. Might not be during Bookmas. I have festive themed things coming up, but definitely want to do that in the new year. I have a list of thriller book recommendations that some of my favorite thriller book girlies have given me. I have some thoughts, I have some ideas, but I picked this up not because I had heard much about the author, but because of the TV show. And I'm someone who likes to read the book before watching adaptations. So Cami and I have started this TV show, and I've read this before we did that because I wanted to know. And I'm so glad I did. And I don't have a lot of thrillers to compare it to because, again, it's not a genre that I read a lot in, but I've heard that because so many thrillers are just plot based, thriller plots can be quite repetitive, and when you read a lot of thrillers you can find things quite predictable. I did not find this predictable at all. I had thoughts and I had theories, and there are so many reveals and plot twists that I was like, wait, I have an idea, and then another plot twist would happen and I go, wait, now I have no idea who done it, because this is like a who done it mystery. But I found the ending so satisfying, and I did listen to like 3 chapters on audio, and the audiobook was really great. So I think maybe thrillers are books that I could pick up more through audio. But I think this was full of surprises. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4-star. I think it's the best thriller book that I have read to date. I haven't read too many, but I have read a handful, and this was my favorite one so far, so I would recommend it. I picked up The Ever King because it was on my 25 books for 2025. I read LJ Andrews' most recent release, I think, and that was her Nordic Viking inspired fantasy, Broken Souls and Bones, and I wasn't a huge fan. I was honestly quite bored with it. I haven't even retained much from it. That's how little I loved that book, and I just think it wasn't for me. And I was trying to figure out if it was because it was more of a Viking book, because I also didn't really love Danielle L. Jensen's Viking book as well. So it was, is this maybe an author that's not for me, or a genre, or maybe is it both? So I picked up The Ever King because I had heard so much about it when it was originally indie published. It's now been traditionally republished. I think it's technically a duology, like there's 2 books following these characters, but there's a bigger series, so there's more books after book 1 and 2, but they might follow new characters. I believe that is how it is, but I'm not sure honestly if this is a series I'm going to continue. I could just read book 2 to read it and wrap it up and get it done with, but I didn't love it. I loved the start of the book, and I can't put my finger on exactly what it is. I'm just thinking maybe big pirate books aren't for me. So I'm like, maybe this author just writes in these sub niches of fantasy that aren't my favorite or I don't love, because the way that she was writing the chapters and the sentences, and I found myself really drawn to. I just didn't care about the characters, and I didn't really care too much about the overall like storyline or ambience. So I'm thinking maybe again it's a genre thing. I just don't like the types of fantasy books she reads. But I also think if I read this a year ago when it was on Kindle Unlimited and everyone was raving about it, I may have enjoyed it even more. I just think again this year I have really been finding my specific reading taste and knowing what I do and don't love. So I probably would have loved it more last year when I hadn't read as many books, but now I just think the moment for this has passed. This isn't a story that I'm gravitating towards or have too much of an interest to pick up in. So I think it's going to be a series I DNF. I think this would be good if you're just getting into romantasy and trying to figure out what types of fantasy romance books that you like, but it definitely doesn't have a slow burn. And I didn't expect it to have a slow burn, but I also don't think I expected it to be as fast of a burn as it was. In book club, we read Blood Over Brighthaven. I had read The Sword of Kaigan at the start of this year with my book club, so this is my second ML Wong book that I have read, both standalone fantasy reads. Now, Blood Over Brighthaven has this dark academia background with a magic system that I found a little bit complex to grasp at the start of the story, but I feel like the book was written in a almost pretentious manner because of the academia setting. Like that's something I kind of expect when I go into dark academias. I might struggle a little bit to grasp the world, the magic, the academic setup. So after a few chapters of understanding, I wrapped my head around, and the style of writing that ML Wong uses I think suits the story. I just was kind of a little bit angry with the way the book ended. It is not at all where I thought it was going to go. I've seen a lot of people say this is one of the best books they've ever read, 5-6 stars, rave about it. And I've also seen another side of readers who have DNF'd it and say that it's overly pretentious and they don't understand the hype and they don't like a lot to do with it. I think, you know, I've kind of seen 2 extremes. I'm kind of sat right in the middle. I think it was an interesting story. I think it was out of my comfort zone. I think a lot happened for a book that was like under 500 pages on my Kindle, but it was a 2.75 star read for me, because I think there's certain readers that I would recommend it to, but I wouldn't recommend it to everyone. I don't think it was a bad book. I just think it wasn't for me personally. And then the final book we picked up was Hollow. This is an ARC copy that the Twisted Sisters sent across. That's why it's in black and white. I love the Twisted Sisters. I have my Zodiac Academy shelf right here of all their books. I have read Zodiac Academy, I have read the spin-offs, the prequel, Darkmoor Penitentiary, Ruthless Boys of the Zodiac. I have read Neverkeep, their new series, Sins of the Zodiac, and now I have read Hollow. So they still have more series and a backlog that I can go through, but a lot of their books are so different. So Zodiac Academy is very much cheesy urban fantasy books with a lot of modern day references and slang, and mixed with a celestial and elemental inspired magic system and so many different immortal, powerful, magical beings. And then Sins of the Zodiac, the new series Neverkeep, is set in the same world but in a completely separate part of the world. So we're in a new location, it's a military academy setting, it's more high fantasy. We don't have that modern slang and technology that we get from Zodiac Academy, like Feybook, but they're written in similar styles. I still think Neverkeep is one where if you didn't like Zodiac Academy, you could pick up Neverkeep and see if that's more of your style of book. I don't think if you hated Zodiac Academy or love Zodiac Academy, you'll necessarily love or hate the other. They're similar enough that you can kind of tell that they're the same author, but written, again, 2 completely different series, just with the overall same magic system in the same world. Whereas Hollow is a brand new series in a brand new world. So far, from what I know, from my research. I don't believe this is supposed to be set in the same world as Zodiac Academy. I think the authors had confirmed that this was a brand new world and a new series. And I just love seeing them write different things. I think the one thing that they do consistently well in all of their books is they keep you on your toes, because you kind of have to expect the unexpected with them, because you think the storyline will be going one way and then they will pivot. They are not afraid of a brutal cliffhanger or plot twist. They're not afraid to make crazy decisions, and I find that it makes the story so entertaining because they get me hooked. They just get me hooked. But it just has like my favorite elements of a Twisted Sisters book, which is expect the unexpected. They are all the books that we read in the month of November. We've had a nice long yap session wrap up today, so I hope you've potentially found some books to add to your TBR, or if you have any of these books on your TBR, maybe you'll go and pick them up this next month. But I'd love to know how many books you read last month in November and what your favorite book. Like, did you have a 5-star read? I had a 5-star read this month. I actually had two. Do you have 2 5-star reads this month? So that was great. Hopefully we pick up some great reads in December, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.